Welcome to We Are DB. I'm Danielle, joined by Brenton.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us this month for our Honorable Mentions episode, as we take the opportunity to talk about a great film that just missed out on being on the IMDb's list for the best movies of all time. This month, rated at 7.6 on the Internet Movie Database by millions of film lovers from around the world, is The Godfather Part 3. Released in 1990, 16 years after Part 2, this film is set in 1979 and stars Al Pacino and Andy Garcia in leading roles. Godfather Part 3 is an Italian-American mafia film and serves as the third and final part of the Godfather saga. Just like the first two parts of the saga, the movie is written for the screen by Mario Puzo and co-written, produced, and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Let's talk about The Godfather.
Like I mentioned last month, we'll not only take this opportunity to talk about Godfather Part 3, but also the Godfather saga as a whole, because this is the last chapter. So we will split this into a spoilers and non-spoilers section for Part 3, but we could have the possibility of having spoilers of the first two parts. Just keep that in mind. Be sure to go check out those episodes if you're interested in our discussions on Part 1 and 2. So the film is set about 20 years after the last one was set, but it was 16 years after the last one was made.
Okay.
I didn't realize, which is probably a little ignorant of me going into this film, and it's probably common knowledge, that Mary was played by Sofia Coppola.
I wondered that.
Who is the director's daughter, but she's also went on to be not only an actress, but a film director.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she's known for The Virgin Suicides, Lost in Translation, Marie Antoinette. She did. Okay. Yeah, so she has a particular style that she's also.
That's the only one I've seen, and yeah, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little obscure.
Which, though that said, like, these movies are a little bit different too, so that doesn't totally surprise me if she was like around her father and seeing the way he directed his films. So,
well, I think her father, Francis Ford, is the executive producer on most of her work.
Interesting.
I think it's interesting seeing Michael Corleone, Pacino's character, in this compared to when you very first see his character at the beginning scene of the first Godfather.
Well, because he's old now.
Yeah.
And I think I said that to you. I'm like, wow, he's really aged. And not just his looks, but he sounds much different.
Yeah, he sounds like Pacino that I know him for.
Yeah.
In most recent things, he's got that gravelly voice where he didn't have in the 70s.
And these are the only movies I've ever seen him in. I wasn't familiar with any of his other stuff. Like, he doesn't sound like the way I was used to hearing him sound, and he doesn't look the way I was used to hearing him look. Like, he definitely... I don't know if they made him up to look older, but I feel like at this age, he settles into the character very nicely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, because at this point, he's meant to be like an experienced Don. I actually think that I like Pacino better in this movie than the previous two. Maybe because he's had that several years more of acting experience. He's got a bit more character to it, which is oddly enough, this is the only one he wasn't nominated for an Oscar for, but I kind of like it better.
Well, and he really portrays that essence of wisdom and experience a lot more. Like you said, like you feel like with his character, you know, he's older, he's a bit softer, but not gone soft.
You kind of believe him to be in that role a little more. When you first see him become the Don at the end of the first Godfather, he's very young and he's sitting there next to Brando. And you don't believe him to be the Don, you know what I mean? He fits well into this role better, I think, in this movie than the previous ones. I've always had this perception that the first two Godfathers are masterpieces and the third one falls flat. This is me without ever seeing it. And I think it would if you've seen the first two a bunch of times, if you grew up with them, and then the third one comes out 16 years later. But for me, watching them in quick succession, without having any sort of predisposed ideas, without having that nostalgia effect, I kind of like them sort of equally. Like, I do like the first two better, but not by much.
I felt this one probably one of the easiest to follow.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because I'd already seen the first two and I'm like, okay, I have an idea of the feel of what they're going for here, so I kind of knew what to expect. I also just found this one more interesting, and like, I felt they really laid it out for you, like, now we're in America, now we're in Italy.
Sicily, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was easier to follow, whereas in the first one, I feel like, we're in Sicily, we're in America, we're in Sicily, we're in America. You know, it was kind of all over the place. They all did have a bit of a different feel to them.
Yeah.
I don't know, I quite like this one. And upon, you know, ruminating on it, I think I liked all of them. Would I watch them all again? Yeah, probably, but only because they were difficult to follow and I kind of want to appreciate the story better, so I want to see it one more time to be like, okay, I think I get what's going on here. Let's just solidify it in my mind, kind of thing.
That being said, I think this is the most easiest to follow, but it was still confusing. All three of them are pretty... You have to be paying attention if you haven't seen the movies before, just to be able to follow along, like, who's who. Because, like I said in the first Godfather discussion, they're all just Italian names. They're all just wearing suits. It's like, who's that guy? Who's that guy?
I think I said in one of our other Godfather episodes, you almost need like a cheat sheet of names and faces to be able to follow along. Again, this one kind of lays it out a lot better for you because in the beginning too, like, there's a lot of new characters, so they have to lay it out for you. You know what I mean? And they have to introduce, like, these are the kids. Now they're grown up. What do they look like? Who are they? You know what I mean? And they're much more rounded characters, as they would be at this point.
I've heard people's ideas before where they've said they probably shouldn't have just made the third part and just left it as 1 and 2. And I can see an argument for that. But I really think that this was kind of necessary. And I kind of like it in its own terms. I'm glad that there's a third part showing these certain events and concluding the saga, because I don't think the end of the 2 was a very good conclusion.
No, I agree with you. And what they do here, it shows the consequences of his actions in the first 2 movies.
I think this is a good addition to the saga. I think the entire trilogy, all 3 of them, are focused more around character and character development more than big concepts or the cinematography or even story.
Yeah, you're following the progression of Michael.
You're following the progression of a series of characters. In the second one, it's definitely Vito, but throughout all 3 of them, it's definitely Michael.
Mm-hmm.
And I really quite like that. Like, there's quite a lot of long scenes about dialogue and the interactions with people and how they handle situations. So it's really, they're 3 long character pieces, really, more so than an action film or a historical film or something. You know, it's really based on the characters.
It looks at issues of humanity a lot. All 3 of them do.
Like what?
And you see that it explores themes like greed and tragedy
and the relationships.
Yeah, and dynamics and family, all those sorts of things. They really go into depth and they look at how they intermingle in life and what are the possibilities for how things could play out. As much as it's not relatable, you know, this dynamic of being a rich mob family, I think they both did a really good job of making this a very human film. You know what I mean? Like, the emotions that are projected by the characters are very relatable.
Yeah. I think this film shows Connie's character.
I really liked that.
Yeah, I really liked it because she's got balls, and it actually finally shows that. She has grown since the last 2 parts, because I think for the first 2 parts, she was more of just a side character, and she was a bit of a pushover.
Well, she was, and she didn't have any substance to her.
Yeah.
Because of what she had gone through with her marriage and everything.
Her relationship.
Yeah. And she didn't have values, whereas now it really shows that she does have values. And I think she's with Michael all the time now. You know what I mean? Like, I think since the second movie, she'd probably been living with him because she ran out of money. She was living the rich girl lifestyle, but never had any money. And so he's like, just come stay with me. I'll take care of you. Is I think what happened. Did that happen?
I'm not sure.
And there's different points in the movie where Mary says it's strange just having Aunt Connie in the house or whatever.
Right.
So I think she does live there with him. And you can really see that, like, she's taken on his values.
Yeah.
I really liked having that strong female character here. And you're right, she really does. She does things that, you know, need to be done, even though Michael doesn't want them to be done.
Yeah.
And
she didn't make those decisions in the first couple.
No.
Obviously, it wasn't her position to in any three of them, but she still did it in the third one. We had a discussion in the first episode about those women in the mob scene, and they just didn't seem to be portraying them as a big part of it or someone with power. And Connie really has shown that growth, and that is evident in the third film.
And you know, I think in that kind of demographic of people, these mob women, I think that strength comes with age because, and this is just going purely off, you know, Hollywood and their conceptions of this, but you tend to have two groups of women in this world. You've got the young women who sit down, shut up, and turn a blind eye, and you've got the older women, the seasoned women who
you don't mess with.
Exactly. And I think that comes with age, and I think that's the change that we've seen in Connie, is that she's gone from being like in the first one, young and just married and being
kind of naive.
Well, and taken advantage of. I mean, her husband beats her and everything, to like, I'll cut a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, she definitely would, and she did in the movie.
It was kind of refreshing to have that character in there.
And revived. Yeah, no, I really appreciated her character.
Let's talk about Vincent's character for a second, because he's a very interesting sort of character. Vincent's Sonny's son, and you see elements of Sonny, Vito, and Michael all in some of the actions and things that he says.
He goes through a significant amount of growth.
Through the course of the film.
Through the course of the movie, and I think they showed it really well.
It's very noticeable from the very beginning to the very last scene, the way he handles that scene. He's not disturbed at all about some of the things that happens. He's very cool and calm and thinks logically. Like, he doesn't really show his emotion apart from anger.
Yeah, I think part of that is because he didn't grow up as a Corleone, because he was born out of wedlock, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, he so badly wants to be a part of the family that he holds that probably as his highest value. And part of the reason why he's not affected by anything is because he knows that in order to be a part of the family, he has to be able to handle and condone this sort of stuff.
Well, it just makes me think, what other experiences and things has he done previously to be able to express that?
Well, he is involved in crime life. Like, he's got a club
right,
that he probably runs things out of. So he's involved, but he wants to be part of the Corleone family.
Yeah.
Well, because he's working with Joey Zaza at the beginning of the movie. He's a muscle man, isn't he?
It was a little unclear to me.
He was working for him. It's really not significant, but the point is that he did have some involvement. And then through the course of the movie, like you say, it's very evident to me too, right from the beginning, that he is Sonny's son. And I think they chose that element of him having a really short fuse to show that. And I think it was a really good idea, because that's the main connection you make between the two of them, you know? That they're both just can get angry really quickly. And Michael even says something like that. He's like, oh, he's just like his father.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And then throughout the course of the movie, you do start to see that growth, because Michael takes him under his wing. And I love those moments where Vincent is being, you know, his own self that's a lot more like Sonny, where he talks without thinking. And he just turns to him and he says, Vincent, will you shut up? You know what I mean? Will you just stop? Because you're not being rational here.
See, even in those scenes, Michael handles them very well, which is, again, showing that he's learnt, he's got the progression.
Well, and he always was kind of like that. And he specifically learned from Vito, you know, right before Vito died. Michael was his consigliere? Is that what they're called? He was his right-hand man, basically. Like, he was always with him all the time. He learned everything he could from his father before his father died. And so you see that he knows exactly what he needs to know. And because he's got kind of that more calm, cool, collected, thinking everything through sort of personality, that's why he made such a good Don. And you can really see that progression in Vincent throughout the rest of the movie, because he goes from being that short fuse ready to blow at any second to being very calm by the end of the movie, which you see. And you see those lessons kind of being slid in here and there throughout the movie. They'll be, never show anyone what you're thinking, or, don't hate your enemies or whatever. There were those kind of lessons slid in throughout the rest of the movie.
It's interesting that you compared it to Vito and Michael's relationship of the first one, because there are a lot of comparisons there with him taking him under his wing and preparing him for this role.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why they decided to add in the weird cousin relationship between him and Mary. Like that, I don't think that was necessary.
I know, I didn't like it. Well,
it showed that he was reckless, and neither of them really think.
It was weird. I think part of the reason why they put that relationship in there is because there's a dynamic between Michael and Mary that you see throughout the film, and it starts to create a lot of tension.
I wonder how much of this movie was actually set in reality, because it relates a lot to the Vatican for some reason. I say that just because John Paul I was actually a pope who was elected around then. He was the pope for 33 days before he died of a heart attack in his sleep, and they depict all of that. And they talk a lot about finances and things, so I'm just wondering how much of it actually relates to what was actually happening in the 70s. I'm not sure.
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I didn't know that. Kind of ballsy if they did portray it that way, honestly.
It's kind of a defamation thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder why they added in so much of that Vatican. Because it wasn't in the first one. So it was very Italian, very Catholic. They didn't go to the Vatican.
I liked that they added it in. I think it added an element of old family Italian culture that we didn't get to see in the other two as much. So I appreciated it, I think. Because I think people underestimate just how important the Catholic Church is to Italian Americans.
Yep.
I appreciated it. And it made it interesting.
Just a interesting bit of trivia. John Cazale.
Who's that?
He played Fredo in the first two.
Okay.
He was only in 5 films.
Ever.
He died in the late 70s. I think he had lung cancer. He was dating Meryl Streep at the time, actually.
Really?
Yeah. All 5 of those films were nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. And then this film, there's archival footage of him right at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And this film was also nominated. So it was 6 for 6, 100%.
That's interesting.
Best Picture. I think we're going to go into spoilers now.
Okay.
About what happens toward the end of this film, because the final hour or so is very tense. The use of the music.
Oh my god, it was just sitting on the edge of your seat the whole time. Because they're at the opera. Have you ever been to an opera?
No, I haven't. I was actually sitting there watching that. I would love to just get really dressed up and go to an actual traditional.
I went when I was in Ukraine. I went with my mom, and it's very much like that. Get dressed up, sit down, beautifully adorned building. Opera halls too, they're so
beautiful,
grand, you know.
Every element of it is just it's nice to be in that area. I've never been to a show where they've actually used the orchestra pit.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
We'll have to go. Operas themselves are very, very dramatic. It's just high emotion the whole time. So that was a really clever way, I think, to incorporate sort of the ambiance and the mood that they were going for there. Because, yeah, for how long? Probably
at least 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was just they the
spliced together a bunch of elements that were all high tension. It was
all the while with the music. With the operatic music in the background.
There was the scenes where the assassin was looking at Michael, Connie was looking at the other guy who was being assassinated.
Don Altobello.
And the Pope was being killed at the same time, all mixed in with these very tense scenes from
on stage,
the play that was being played. I think it was just done really well.
I thought it was too. I turned to you and I said, I can't take this anymore. It's just...
it's too tense.
It's too... you could cut it with a knife. It was too much.
I think these movies are kind of the gradual progression of Michael sort of turning into the villain. Because definitely toward the end of part 2, he's not really liked. And then in the beginning of part 3, you can see how the last 10 years of his life that we've missed, he doesn't have very good relationships. Not with Kay, not with his family, not with his kids. And he's trying to hold on to that and redeem himself. He's trying to...
In the second movie, he was trying really hard. Like, there was that scene before his mom died where he's asking, I think he was asking how did Dad not lose his family or whatever. And she said, well, you can't ever lose family. And that's kind of just Kay. Because she isn't Italian, she doesn't have those same values.
Do you disagree with that statement?
What statement?
It's his gradual decline. It's his fall as the Don, really, and he's trying to grasp onto the last good things of his life, really.
It's interesting because it's very evident and in line with his character that he doesn't want to embody that role. He never wanted to be a villain. And in this movie in particular, he's trying so hard to do everything legitimately. He doesn't want to be involved in crime. And there's that line where he says, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in again. I think it's an interesting statement because I think it is true, even though it's very much not the trajectory that he wants or has ever really wanted to follow.
No, I think that's a good point to note, that he always tried to do it the right way and be the man that he wanted to be, but for a number of reasons, he went in this other direction. I'm saying it's not necessarily his fault, but it still went that way.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree with that. And I think that some of that tragedy that I was talking about, that's the sad part, is that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get away from it. You know what I mean? He couldn't get away from...
the life.
Yeah, and having to embody those negative aspects of it.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the scene that has really stuck with me kind of more than the first two is that very last scene where Michael dies in Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I looked it up because the movie doesn't actually tell you. That scene is meant to be set in 1997, so nearly 20 years after the previous scene at the opera. And when we were watching it, I thought, that's an odd scene to put in there. Why would they do that? There's no dialogue. It's just him sitting there and he dies of a heart attack or old age or whatever it is. And I just thought, why'd you add that in there? You didn't have to. You could have ended it at the previous scene or added something else in there.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've had a couple of days to process it, that one keeps coming back to me because it shows that it was kind of all for nothing. Like, he died sad. Like, it really was a tragedy, and that's the nail in the coffin, is that last scene.
Yeah.
He dies alone in Sicily. It's just such a sad scene, really it is. And that, maybe this is why they said it in 97, that's 50 years after the first time you see him at the wedding. You've basically got the entire life of this person, and you can see his entire trajectory from 47 to 97, and how he started out and where he ended up. And it's really such a sad story.
It is, and it's not at all where he wanted his life to go. You know, he joined the army against the wishes of his father and his family because he wanted to do something that wasn't part of the family. You know what I mean? And I think you really explained it very well, that it really is the nail on the coffin there.
If they didn't have that last scene, you could think to yourself, maybe he went on and fully redeemed himself, or he had a great relationship with his family and his kids, because you do see that progression throughout the movie. But that last scene, adding it there, you're like, oh, this is Endgame. This is how he actually ends. It's just kind of sad to see that this is the last scene that you'll see of Michael Corleone. And you've been on this long story with him for 50 years, but sitting there watching the movies, it's been like 9 hours with the same character, and you're following him. So it's really quite an investment, and that's the last thing. I just think it was very powerful.
I do as well.
Going back to Vincent's character and how he's not really fazed by anything, that very last scene on the steps of the opera, he's kind of shown as pretty heartless, because he just doesn't really have any emotion, especially after Mary's shot. He's just like, well, shit. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't really express himself the way Michael does in that scene, or even Kay, which is interesting.
I think it's fair, though, because, I mean, if you lose a child versus losing a partner, the connection parents have with their children is a lot deeper.
True.
Especially considering that those two, in love as they may well have been, they didn't actually know each other for very long.
I was just expecting more of a reaction, that's all.
I think it's not within his nature, honestly.
Yeah, that's my point of
Yeah.
the character.
Yeah.
It would be out of character for him to show that emotion there.
And he did show as much as he was capable of showing, I think.
Yeah, he showed that initial anger when he shot the guy, and then he was just sort of not much else after that, because that's essentially the number one emotion that he presents.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice the first time Anthony sings for Michael, you do sort of see this disappointed look on his face, because he was wanting him to do law school. He wanted him to go into the family, and he went on this other trajectory.
This is when he was playing the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, again, a very good comparison to Vito's relationship, because Michael was wanting to do his own thing as well. But the difference there, Michael got sucked in and Anthony didn't. But I thought that was interesting to note, because by the end, in the opera scene, it focuses on Michael's reaction to his performance there, and there's a growth there. He can see that he's happy for him.
And he's so proud. And because he's not just, playing gigs at a bar. He's
very good.
That's
and
what
he's
I mean.
He's sticking to that, his Italian culture, and embracing that.
And like he points out in the hospital, it's a big honor to have his debut operatic performance in Palermo at the Opera House. Like you hear him say pursue music. I'm like, in the garage band style? No, in like a very honorable fashion. You know what I mean? So I can see where that pride came from. I think it's interesting. By the end of the movie, you kind of think things are starting to turn one way, because you can see, got quite a good relationship with Mary. It's a little bit strained, but you figured that's going to work itself out. His relationship with Anthony is a lot better. His relationship with Kay is a lot better. So you're kind of thinking, oh, maybe this is going to go the happy ending kind of way. And it so doesn't, which I think is refreshing, because you're starting to see more now, but not a whole lot of movies will go that tragic route.
Yeah,
and
they usually like to wrap these things up in a nice little bow, and everyone's all happy by the end of it.
Well, and the problem there is that that's not how life goes.
Yeah.
And
none of these movies have really been about that. They've always gone that other direction, really.
Yeah, which is good, and I appreciated. And as much as the ending was very, very sad, I think it's very realistic,
Yeah. I was actually really quite surprised to see Mary die in the end, and that hit me more than watching Michael get shot, because she was a bystander. She was kind of innocent. Her last words were "Dad."
Yeah.
And it's pretty emotional.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because in that scene, she was asking him, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, like why won't you let me love the person I want to love? And that was exactly why. If she had been involved with him, the likelihood of her getting hurt was much higher. And I just think, isn't it so ironic and sad that he was doing everything he could to protect her, and because of that, she died?
I was thinking about it, because he kept saying, I'm trying to protect you, and apart from the obvious dating your cousin kind of thing, what is he protecting him from? Oh, Vincent's the new Don now, and he's got people after him. It could be dangerous, because Michael says that they go after the ones that they love. Mm-hmm. So that's another risk for being involved with him, apart from the obvious.
Yeah.
And that's what he was really trying to protect her from, and it ultimately leads to her demise.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yes.
I think watching this third part kind of makes me appreciate the first two a little better, and I would like to watch the whole series again, because I think I quite like the saga as a whole entity.
Yeah.
Because, like I've said in previous episodes, I like to follow this one sort of story arc, this one character all the way through, from the start to the finish, because it has more weight behind it when you know what their decisions are like and what they are as a person and how their life went this way. I really quite like the trilogy, and I think I like it a little bit better now that I've seen the third part.
I think so too. I actually really agree with you in saying that the third part kind of makes the other two make a little bit more sense to me. And I also would really like to give it a watch through the whole thing again later. Probably not anytime really soon.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time on The Godfather lately.
Yeah, give it a break.
You said before that all three of them have their own different feel, and I completely agree with that, and yet they all feel like Godfather movies. And I think being able to do that and create 3 films that feel like the same entity, but each of them have their own different feel, is a very good characteristic, and it's really quite a difficult thing to achieve, and I think that credit is due to Coppola to be able to do that. That's a good trilogy.
Yeah, no, it's impressive.
I think Paramount was trying to push for a part 4 by the late 90s. And I think it was going to be set just before Godfather 1. So it was going to be like young Sonny and young Michael.
Oh, okay.
The article that I read on it, they were looking to cast Leo DiCaprio as Sonny, because he was quite young at the time doing Titanic and such. But that would have just been terrible, honestly. It would have.
And the thing is, like, aside from the obvious of him not looking like the original actor, I don't think he would have played it very well. I don't think he would have played it the right way.
Yeah, he wouldn't have played it quite the way that the original actor did. And it wasn't long after part 3 was made that Mario Puzo died, so you wouldn't even have his consultancy on that.
Yeah, no, it was good that they just left well enough.
Yeah, just leave it.
Just leave it. Too much of a good thing, right? Yeah. And then you just wreck the whole batch.
I just wanted to take this moment to announce that next month's Honorable Mention episode will be The Revenant from 2016, because I'm very surprised that that film's not in the top 250, and I think that it should be deserved to have a discussion about. And we will be having a special guest on that episode, so stick around until after the end music to figure out who that is.
We have been Danielle and Brenton this week. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to subscribe
it's no one
wherever
special, it's
you
just
get
my
your
sister.
podcasts or comment on SoundCloud. And until next time, thanks for listening.